Good morning, everyone. My name's Tim Wicks, and I currently serve as head of practice here at City Center. Thank you all for venturing out on this blustery day for a Dharma talk today, which is going to be by Lisa Hoffman. She was ordained as a priest at San Francisco Zen Center in 2008 by the late Darlene Cohen, my beloved Darlene Cohen, and by Darlene's partner, Tony Patchell. Lisa received Dharma transmission from Tony in 2013. As a part of the Great Compassion Sangha she founded, Lisa leads classes, works with individual students, and leads retreats in San Francisco Bay Area and online. She is a teacher with San Francisco Zen Center, where she offers Dharma talks, leads workshops, and is part of a team facilitating courses and workshops in transforming depression and anxiety. I think there's one coming up pretty soon, I believe. She founded and is now the consulting teacher for Women's Heart Sangha, an intimate community of mature women committed to living with awareness and compassion. As a coach, facilitator, and consultant to the nonprofit community, Lisa integrates Zen and mindfulness in her work with people and organizations. Her mindfulness in the workplace workshops include mindful leadership, communication in the workplace, relationships in the workplace, the Zen of meetings, mindfully managing stress, and much more. Lisa is a fellow priest. We did Shogaku priest ongoing training together, a spot program that had 2 manifestations. She's a friend and lives here in San Francisco with her partner Krima, who's here today. And I had to say that Lisa is an incredible cook. I've had several opportunities to taste her delicious cooking. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know whether to sing or talk with this music stand, but I do practice compassion, so I will not sing. So I want to thank you all for being here and welcome you all. And it just fills me with joy to be with you. It's a good day when I'm at City Center, or Tassajara, or Green Gulch. And I wonder who today is here for the first time? Oh my God, John. And who hasn't been here for a while? I want to extend a special warm welcome to you. And I want to thank Tanto-san Tim for inviting me, and Abbot-san David, a dear friend, for taking care of all of our temples in this Sangha. And we co-lead Transforming Depression and Anxiety together along with Paul Irving, which is just a real joy. Oh, I also want to say hello to our friends, our Sangha on live stream. I promise I'm not going to forget you. And a warm welcome to you also. This is a difficult time. What's happening in the world and in the country, along with whatever in our own lives we might be dealing with, challenges, hopefully joys, not just difficulties. And so what I want to talk about this morning is taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Teacher, teaching, and community. This community this morning, a beloved community of practice. I know not everyone here considers themselves Buddhist, so I invite and encourage you, whatever community or practice that you find refuge in, bring that into the room, and hopefully some of my words will resonate, whether you consider yourself Buddhist or not. So I wanted to begin my talk by expressing gratitude for my teachers and mentors. And the first one is my heart teacher, who passed away in 2011, Darlene Cohen. I really wanted to bring her into this room. And her Dharma name, and I want to say it a couple of times, it's Great Spirit Manifesting Dharma. Great Spirit Manifesting Dharma. Surei Kenpo. And the first time I heard her talk in this building, I certainly didn't consider myself a Buddhist or expect to become a Buddhist. And every word, her energy, her presence spoke to me. So here I am. Who knew? And I also want to express gratitude for one of my mentors, the founder of Transforming Depression and Anxiety, Lee Lipp. I wanted to really bring her into the room as well. I hope you see the warmth and the joy. And her Dharma name is River of Patience, Singing Heart. River of Patience, Singing Heart. Ninsen Kashin. And the first thing I want to suggest is that each of us can be great spirits manifesting Dharma. Some of us are meant to do that in a big way. Most of us, we do that in our corner of the world, in our own way. And I just hope to share a few words about how we can all lift our corners of the world just a little bit by how we live, by what we say, by how we take refuge. And we can all be rivers of patience, singing hearts. Some of us maybe have little work to do on the patience part. It's okay. Some of us, like me, as part of our compassion practice, only sing in the shower, but our hearts can sing at times. So the next thing that I want to do is invite all of us to bring our teachers, our mentors, our guides into this room, to invite the Buddhas and ancestors into this room. And close your eyes for a moment and bring into your mind's eye, your heart, your teachers, your mentors, your guides, whoever they are. One of my mentors was Miss Giannotti, my 8th grade English teacher, who at a time I really needed it, taught me kindness, especially with my very obvious, very huge crush on her. And my Jewish grandmothers were teachers of deep compassion, generosity, unconditional love. Bring your teachers, bring your mentors into this room so that we fill this room with their wisdom, their presence, what we have learned and what we embody from them. And then I want to ask you to open your eyes and reassure you it's okay for you to talk at this point in my Dharma talk. And just as a Sangha, name your teacher, your mentor, your guide, all together, out loud. Just say the name of a mentor, a guide, teacher. Excellent. And let's bring them into the room, let sink into their wisdom, compassion, and teaching, because that's what our practice is. So, in thinking about this talk, I reflected on the word refuge and what it means. And being an English major, I looked it up in the Oxford Dictionary. And the literal definition is a condition of being safe or sheltered from pursuit, danger, or trouble. And that's so powerful and interesting to me because there's no guarantee of safety in this world. We just need to pay a little attention to know that. And yet there are moments and places of safety and of comfort, like this moment, I hope. So we take refuge in these moments of safety and comfort and learning so that we can sink into and ground those moments and move into the world that's often not so safe, being upright, lifting up and offering compassion when we can. And also, in reflecting on this talk and the meaning of safety, the meaning of refuge, I reflected on the Buddha's first teaching of old age, sickness, and death. I think of our Caroline, who we lost in Tassajara, whose memorial is at Green Gulch tomorrow. Some people we lose sooner than others. And this teaching is very heavy on my heart because of what's happening with some of our friends. Progressive MS, bringing one of our friends to a rehab home that's not the best. My 93-year-old father, who is struggling with end-stage kidney disease, and it's very difficult. I'll just say he's a fighter from the Bronx and leave it at that. So we all grapple with all manner of old age, sickness, and death. And we look, I think, and yearn for safety. And that reminds me of the first teaching I received from Darlene, taking refuge in teaching. It was in a meditation group that she had invited me to join. And after a talk, she asked us, "What can you trust?" And we said lots of things. And when we were finally done with our ideas, she said, "What you can trust is this moment to be exactly as it is." And I have to tell you, I did not like that answer very much, because with what was going on in my life at that time, I wasn't liking the moment too much. I kind of wanted the next moment, or maybe even the next year, to come a lot sooner. And yet I felt the truth of that at the same time. Not one, not two, right? And so if this moment is really all we have and what we can trust, sometimes it's joyful, sometimes it's heartbreakingly painful. How do we sink into it? How do we meet the moment? And what comes up for me what came up for me in preparing this talk is the image of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree for 49 days. Can you all bring that into your mind's eye? Not moving, even though there were all manners of temptations, fears, anxieties, thoughts, all kinds of emotions threatening to knock him off his seat. I see them as the same experiences we have within us and around us every day. And sometimes they knock us off our seat, sometimes they don't. And yet we have this meditation seat, we have a ground of being, a place of refuge together that we cultivate within ourselves to return to. So I was very shocked early in my practice to discover that equanimity didn't mean you were calm all the time, and I have to admit I was pretty disappointed. That was my idea. And then I began to learn equanimity is meeting the moment as it is, including when we're knocked off our seat, and noticing, and we get back on our seat. Knocked off, back on. Sometimes we waver a little bit, quiver, and we keep meeting the moment as best we can. That's our practice, right? And that's what we learn one way or another from our teachers and the teachings. And I'm glad to share with you that these days I'm okay that what I can trust is this moment as it is, even if I don't like it. Because that really is all we have. It really is. So if I don't meet this moment, I am not living my life. We are not living our lives. And Darlene was completely knocked off her seat in her mid-30s when she very suddenly developed very virulent rheumatoid arthritis and was bedridden. And that became her practice, and that really generated her beautiful teaching, meeting that moment of being in excruciating pain after a lifetime of strength and really no illness to speak of, bedridden. And what Darlene did after 7 years of practice is meet the moment by noticing. What are parts of my body that aren't in pain? What can I move with ease? When people visit me, what does my body tell me? From whom do I receive energy? And who takes energy? What are these moments telling me about my body and my practice? And what the next thing needs to be. I'm going to check my watch because I promised Tim I usually don't give long Dharma talks, so I better stick to that promise. So I want to talk a little bit about Lee Lipp, my other main mentor, and her teachings. And I had known her for many years, and then she invited me to co-teach Transforming Depression and Anxiety with her. And one of the things I noticed right away was how joyfully she met everyone who walked in to our workshop room, and how open she was about her own struggles with depression and anxiety, and how she encouraged everybody by saying, "You are doing the best you can. You really are. So keep doing the best you can, whatever that means." And then one of the things that I think we all love so much about her was City Center would bake cookies, which we would have in the afternoon. And she was like a PSA for cookies all morning because it gave her so much joy. One of those little things, it's easy to miss, that gave her so much joy. And from both Darlene and Lee, one of their teachings, one of the things to notice and learn about both of them was the joy they took in the little things and the big things. In Darlene's book, Turning Suffering Inside Out, there's a chapter called The Disinterested Pursuit of Pleasure. Isn't that a great title? And that means to notice the little joys and pleasures that are all around us, even in moments of great suffering in the world, in our lives. They might be very small joys and pleasures to notice and take in. So one of Lee's main teachings was cookie joy. And taking refuge in Sangha, that's what we're doing now. We come together, we meditate. We're encouraged not to move or wiggle when we meditate together. So that's a gift. And we learn together. And hopefully we receive kind, honest feedback when perhaps we're not so skillful. That's something that Darlene really encouraged us. That within our sanghas, we can help each other by holding up a mirror with compassion and kindness and honesty. And so we take refuge together as a Sangha in the Buddha and the Dharma, learning joys, pleasure, sorrows. The Women's Sangha, which Tim mentioned, I've been part of for many, many years. And we used to joke that we would grow old together, and now it's happening. We are growing old together. And what a gift, because it's unavoidable. So why not do it together? So I want to close my talk with what I think of as an embodiment of teacher, teaching, and Sangha. And both Lee and Darlene passed away from cancer. Lee passed away about 8 years ago. So 2016. And she was in coming home hospice. And all kinds of people were visiting her, and just about every person who visited her brought cookies. So I went there, and there was the most unbelievable little mountain of cookies you've ever seen. And there was, sitting there, her death doula, someone who escorts, supports us through that process, a member of our Sangha, and she was encouraging everybody, leave a cookie, take a cookie, because that's what Lee would want. And I was so struck that even at that moment when Lee was unconscious, she was teaching. She was teaching. So I want to end my talk with that feeling and image. And I invite questions and comments. I would love anyone who would care to share the name of your teacher and a sentence or two about a teaching you received from them, we can learn together from you. So thank you.
We have plenty of time for questions. I don't think the microphone's on. Well, it's not on my end. Sorry.
How's this? That's better. We have plenty of time for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and I will bring the microphone over to you.
This isn't a question, but my teacher is Agent Linda Cutts, who teaches at Green Gulch Farm, lives at Green Gulch Farm. She was a great friend of Darlene's, and I can remember we were at Tassajara during a practice period, and she had just learned that Darlene had cancer, and she screamed in the Zendo. It was so painful for her. And for me, that was a lesson in just being able to express one's feelings. You know, usually we would not scream in the Zendo. And I just appreciated the depth of her feeling for her friend. Yeah, just wanted to share that.
Thank you for your talk, Lisa. That was really good. My teachers are Surei Darlene Cohen from Green Gulch and Jiryu from Green Gulch, and we practiced at San Quentin together. And I learned from Lee DeBarros to grow old, get sick, and die with grace.
Thank you for such a wonderful topic and engaging us in this way. In the summer of 2010, Darlene was at Tassajara for about a week, and she encouraged us with her physical ailments and seeing how she did her bows and how she had an alternate way of doing everything in the Zendo. And that was when I first felt like it was legit for me to sit in a chair with my physical limitations. So thank you for bringing her into the room. There's many teachers that I could bring that I've talked about before. One of them I haven't talked about in a long time, but I only knew her as Mrs. Baker. I don't even remember her first name, but she was a teacher for me. She was, to me, she had this quality that I still struggle with but have made small bits of growth in, and that is patience. You know what it's like when someone is forced patient? Like you can tell they're being patient with you, but they're really annoyed inside. She was the opposite. She was someone that just felt like she had an infinite reservoir for you. And Mrs. Baker was born in 1900 in what was then the Oklahoma Territory, not yet a state, and was married at age 14. And when she had her first daughter at 16, she was born with mental difficulties and had Down syndrome. And I knew Mrs. Baker at age 86, and Claudia was 73, her daughter, or 70. So she was 70, and she did everything with Claudia, and went everywhere, and they had pretty much been together the last 70 years. And she never seemed like she felt that anything was unfair on the planet, that there was anything wrong. She was just the most patient person. And anytime I feel like I'm in a rush or I'm weighed down or whatever, I think of Mrs. Baker and of Claudia, and I'm like, that. Yeah, that.
Thank you. Darlene had a long period of not being so connected with Zen Center after she was diagnosed and dealing with her rheumatoid arthritis. And then Michael Wenger, who I know many of us know, asked her to come and be Shuso. And she said, but I can't sit on a cushion. And he said, it doesn't matter. And she was a groundbreaker with bringing chairs into the Zendo. And as you said, Michael, adjusting our forms, how she bowed, a lot of what she did so that she could be here. And that is what is important, that we're here in whatever way we can be.
Thank you for your talk. That was wonderful. I think my central question is what we do when the mentors we have done very positive things for us. We've learned quite a bit from them.
Could you talk a little louder?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mike, this way? Is that better?
Oh, that's great.
That's much better. So my central question is about having mentors who have done very wonderful things and we've learned from them, but also have done very negative things in their lives and in our lives, and how one will process that. So I have 3 mentors. My father, who introduced me to Zen Buddhism at the age of maybe 8 at the LA Zen Center. And he was a wonderful man, but also very self-involved, so didn't treat his children or grandchildren that well. And then I had an experience like you had, where my father was teaching at Naropa, and I was 15, and I went to a talk, and some fellow in robes walked into the room, sat on the stage, and started talking, and everything in the world and psychology all just fell into place. And it turned out that was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And that's when I realized, oh, I think I'm a Buddhist. But there are some negative happenings there. And then my third is Cornel West, who I was lucky enough to study with. And I actually can't think of any negative things there, but he's still a burning light for me. Thank you.
So your question is how to process, how to hold a teacher who has great wisdom and also great weaknesses and perhaps has caused harm? Okay. That's a really good question. I think it's especially relevant for San Francisco Zen Center. And I think that there is, my experience, not I think, is that there's no cookie cutter answer or way of processing or practicing with that reality. I think it is person by person, and sitting with the whole person and our precepts, our values, and our practice, and see what surfaces, what emerges in how to hold that person, the whole of them. And there have been people in my life that I've needed to let go of, and people in my life with great strengths and great flaws where I haven't done that. I think with our practice, it's helpful if, however we hold someone like that, we can do so with as much understanding and compassion as possible, which doesn't mean we don't hold accountability, but to do so with some level of connectedness, I think, is our practice. It's not easy.
That's very helpful, and it makes me think of what you said earlier, to sit, not try to resolve the good and the bad of the person, in this instance, like my father, into one thing that I'm having trouble holding dear, but to hold the positive that was there, and then to also hold the negative that was there, to be in both places and not find that a contradiction, not try to resolve it.
Thank you. Been a long time since we've seen each other.
Lisa and I shared Darlene as a teacher for a long time. And the one thing that Darlene told me, which I still struggle with, is I have a problem with judging people. Still have that problem. Who's smarter than who's more Zen than who, I'm judging people. And Darlene would say, Mary, what would happen if you got down off that seat and got down in the muck with everybody else? And yeah, you're nodding your head, muck. That's a very Darlene thing to say. And that has helped me and continues to help me, that idea of, she would often talk about the muck. So if you can say anything about that.
I heard someone say recently that lotuses thrive in the muck. And that's a really good teaching.
We've had a couple of questions come in over the chat. I'll give you the first one first, and we'll see if we have time for a second. The first comes from Ruth, who first says thank you. And then, I wonder what you've found most rewarding about teaching your class about transforming anxiety and depression.
I'm going to cheat and say two things. The first are the students. Their sincerity and their engagement, and there are points in the class where there's peals of laughter, which one might not expect from a course about anxiety and depression. And the other is my co-teachers. Being part of a team that carries forth Lee's teaching is a deep joy. A deep joy. Thank you.
And our second online question, can you speak about how we can find refuge in the Sangha when we struggle to motivate engaging in others due to personal suffering?
It's a really good question. I've had times in my practice where that's been a challenge. I would encourage you to come to Sangha and be here in whatever way you're able to, and take care of your own suffering by being here. And see what unfolds. I think pushing to connect doesn't work. And of course, one of the Buddha's teachings is impermanence, so suffering does change. And I think coming to Sangha, opening to other people's connections and practice without necessarily saying a word helps transformation. So thank you for that question. And I will just add from my own experience when I've been in that space, even though I'm very extroverted, anyone who knows me knows I love to talk to people. There have been times where I've had so much emotional pain, I just didn't want to talk or connect, and I kept coming, and that changed. So I really encourage you, come to Sangha and let yourself be nourished by Sangha, and I believe it will change.
Yeah, so what you're saying about taking refuge brings to mind a superpower of Lee's and Darlene's that I'd like to just bring up a memory for each one of them and ask you about it, about that particular superpower. So superpower I'm thinking of is that they didn't have to lean into, oh, I'm transforming suffering now. But they let the suffering be itself. So for instance, Lee, when she was in a lot of pain about something, would moan or say, ouch, that hurts, but she wouldn't say it with, her face wouldn't get weird. It was really interesting. And then Darlene and I once, I was lucky enough to lead a practice period or a couple of practice periods with Darlene. And in the particular one I'm thinking of, she stayed here. So she was in room 1, which is no longer. But she would get up really, really early in the morning to prepare to come to Zazen. So she was practicing with a disability, but she would be getting up 90 minutes to 120 minutes earlier than the wake-up bell so that she could do a few exercises and, get warm, drink tea, and not rush herself, which when she rushed, it would be worse. And so, then she would come down to the Zendo and she'd do Zazen. Anyway, that superpower that I'm talking about isn't easy to understand, because if we're, life is suffering, there's an origin, there's an end. If we're there, then that's not what I'm talking about. Their superpower was to be in the wealth of nature that includes that suffering, instead of to kind of divorce themselves from it. It was unusual.
So I'm going to respond by telling a story about Lee. And can you all see in this picture, she's got what's called a ground cherry in her hand, which she had never heard of. I brought it from our garden, and she was at the end stage of her cancer and her ability to be at home. She wasn't leaving the house. And I just thought she would enjoy the ground cherry, because how many of you have ever opened a snapdragon? Well, a ground cherry is sort of enveloped with these leaves, and then you squeeze the bottom and the leaves part, and the ground cherry appears. You can see it. And so I brought her this bowl of ground cherries, and she was in a lot of pain, hadn't left the house. And as you said, Vicki, very present with that. And she didn't make a fuss about it, at least with me, and was just there with that pain and suffering. And the laughter when she popped open that ground cherry and saw the little orange cherry, filled the room. So that was all at the same time, right? And I think they both had that superpower of including as much of everything as any human can include. What's that book by The Full Catastrophe? And with Darlene, that brings up a memory where she and Michael Wanger co-led our short spring practice period, and there's a 3-day retreat. And there was an endless stream of interviews, practice discussions with students. And Darlene was in so much pain on the last day that her joints were swollen and it was hard for her to move. And, but she said to Michael, well, I had more practice discussions than you, so I won. And, that he was her mentor, so they both laughed. And you felt the joy in the room, as well as the suffering, because she was also very direct about that when she hurt. And that way of learning by being with your teacher is irreplaceable, of just spending time around them and absorbing what they have to give. We all loved being around Darlene, and I'll tell another Lee story. Let me check the time here. So as Tim said in his introduction, I do a lot of facilitation and training in my day job. And the first time Lee and I taught, David will agree, she was very clear about how she wanted things to be. And so she took over, and then she gave me a lot of feedback at the end of the day. And I said, oh, great, great. And she couldn't believe that I liked getting the criticism for her. And so she just started laughing. And she had fibromyalgia and a traumatic brain injury from a fall. So she was often in a lot of pain and discomfort. But her joy that I liked her bossing me around and being in charge was palpable. It was just fun. So I think their superpowers are also fun.
We have time for more questions.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Can you hear me all right? Yeah.
Always good to see you.
Thank you. It's always good to see you, too. And yeah, I think it's really important for us to shine a light on depression and not suffer in silence. And it's easy sometimes, external projections can hide what's going on under the surface. And I want to be the first to say that I've experienced what Lee Lipp would call lowered mood states, or clinical depression, most of my life. And I'm in perhaps what I can only say is maybe the darkest period of my life right now that I can remember. Mm-hmm. The last few months have been just one thing after another that both on a global level and on a personal level and our community have just been one load of terrible news after another. And I know I can only abide in this moment, and I can only say that the past events, recent events, have just colored this moment in such a way that it's very hard to deal with one thing at a time when everything turns into despair. And it's all I can do to stay here in this moment, in this place, in this body, and just experience what's going on. I keep thinking about, like a fish in a puddle, what pleasure is there here? Because I'm really struggling to find joy these days. And just wonder what advice, I mean, no teacher has prepared me exactly for this. I mean, there's a lot of practical advice that I can give myself and teachers' words that I hear in my ears over the years. And it's very hard to put it into practice right now.
Excuse me, very hard to what?
Put it into practice right now. It's kind of aimed at one thing at a time, and then I just wonder what advice you have for when every moment, when each moment, this moment, is just becomes despair. Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank you for your honesty and making yourself vulnerable. And one of the magic things that happens in transforming depression and anxiety is everybody realizing they're not alone when they feel alone in despair, depression, anxiety. And for me, that's one of the reasons Sangha is so important, because it's so easy with despair to feel alone and even abandoned. So that makes me all the more grateful that you share where you really are. I think that's important, and that's what I would encourage you to do, but you're already doing it. I know many people who feel the way you do because of what is going on in the world, complicated by their lives. And I think these are the times where we live at moments breath by breath, and sometimes are carried by teachers and our Sangha. And for me, it's very important at those moments to take in kindness and compassion and nourishment. At times of despair, we need nourishment. And the other practice or way of being with despair is to meet it, which you're doing, Choco. You're meeting it even though it's really, really hard. And I would encourage you to continue sharing when it feels safe to do so. There are some people one doesn't want to be vulnerable with. It's not the skillful thing to do. And in taking in nourishment and comfort, really let it sink into your body and your bones as best you can. And it reminds me of Thich Nhat Hanh, the late Thich Nhat Hanh, saying, doing dishes, I am doing dishes. Walking, I am walking. Sometimes despairing, I am despairing. And that's what's happening. And it will change because, as the Buddha taught, the only constant in life is change. And the other thing I would encourage you is to, sometimes I imagine myself falling into the arms of Sangha. So fall into our arms, Choku, during this dark time. Let yourself be held and carried, okay?
Thank you. I need to learn to trust those arms. I'm deeply distrustful of those arms sometimes. So.
And may I say you have a big hug coming from me if you come for cookies and tea.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you all for
Could you speak up?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
thank you.
Just wanted to thank you, and thank you for your last response, and just addressing despair and darkness and all the things that we have to take us down. You know, I've really struggled as well, and I had an old teacher. His name was Cy Payne, and he was an enigmatic figure in another community that I'm a part of. And one time he was in a really bad fire, and his whole body was covered in first-degree burns, and he was in the hospital. And he was miserable, really miserable, and hating the world and hating life and not wanting to talk to anybody. And a nurse came in and said, "Oh my God, Cy, there's this other person next to you that's really, really suffering and wants to talk to you." And Cy was like, "I don't want to talk to that guy. Don't you know how much I'm suffering?" And then anyway, he finally did it. And it was maybe like an hour talking to this other person, and he was able to it didn't make the pain go away. Kind of like you were saying with, Darlene, it's not that the pain goes away, but when we get out of ourselves sometimes a little bit, just to talk to someone else and meet their suffering, there's some relief that comes, because then it's not all about me. And I think a lot of times my suffering is all kind of self-created, because all I'm doing is thinking about myself. And not to say that sometimes I do. I need to address what's happening inside, but there's times in which just even temporarily getting out of me can help. And I just wanted to share that.
I want to finish with a quick story about Darlene that relates to what you just shared, and thank you. She used to say, before practice, it was me. And with practice, it's me, you. Me, you. And the other thing I want to end with evoking Avalokiteshvara, Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, who walks by our side, who's with us when we suffer, doesn't take it away. Sometimes there are incarnations with tools of compassion to support and help us. But we walk our paths with others, and we walk our paths. So may your path be full of joy and Sangha and awareness. And cookies, or fruit if you don't eat cookies. Thank you.
Thank you. There are cookies in the very near future. I forget what I'm supposed to do. Oh, thank you.